The Mercenary Tribunal is far and away the most exciting part of Disco Elysium. Honestly, it might be one of the most intense sequences in all of video games. It kicks off when Harry and Kim return to the Whirling in Rags after interrogating Ruby underneath the Feld building. At the time, their investigation into the death of Lely, the Crenell mercenary leader who was shot and then hung outside the hostel, has reached a bit of a standstill. Ruby was the only suspect the dynamic detective duo had yet to speak to, and now that they know she's innocent, they're just about out of leads. So they head back to the Whirling, trying to figure out where to go next. If you didn't arrest Klasia, then they're planning on questioning her some more once they get back to the Whirling. She is, after all, the person who pointed them in Ruby's direction. If you did arrest Klasia, then they're just straight up looking for a new sense of direction. But shortly after Harry and Kim cross the bridge, they're alerted to the showdown unfolding in the streets. The tribunal itself is something Joyce Messer, the representative from the Wild Pines group, the company who hired the mercenaries in the first place, has been warning about for quite a while. As a private military company, a PMC, the Crenell Mercs operate by an entirely different set of rules than everyone else in Revachol. It doesn't matter to them that Harry is trying to figure out what happened to their leader. The Hardys claim responsibility to save Klasia's skin, and so Everard Clare could escalate the dockworkers' strike. So as Crenell sees it, it's time to get some vengeance for their fallen comrade, and nothing is going to stop them. Still, Harry and Kim are determined to try. Revachol is basically a sentient bomb crater. It's a real shithole, but over the past several days, it's become their shithole. They built an attachment to these people, from the arguing old geezers to the Hardys themselves. And now, it's time for the two cops who came to this unwanted district as a result of a precinct pissing contest to step up and defend it from highly trained killers. So the disco cop and his trusty sidekick charge into the fray, right between the two sides. Behind them, it's Titus and his Hardy boys, along with Elizabeth, the union's lawyer. Titus and the Hardys are on a short list of people in Revachol who have guns, which would normally make them a formidable fighting force. But that's not the case today. Because standing across from them and right in front of our protagonist are the three Crenell mercenaries, Raoul Courtenard, Phyllis DePaul, and Rude Hohenlohe. Due to Lely's death, Raoul was assumed command of the group, but he was previously their second in command. DePaul operates the radio, and Hohenlohe serves as weapons specialist. They're armed to the teeth with semi-automatic weapons. Hohenlohe is sporting an anti-tank rifle for God's sake, and they're all wearing powerful ceramic armor. To make matters worse, they're completely drunk, just straight up hammered, which is sure to complicate any attempt to get them to think rationally. Focusing specifically on the disparity in firepower between the two groups, something that can be a bit confusing about Disco Elysium is the way guns and access to guns works in the lore. For the most part, if someone in Disco Elysium has a gun, it's a muzzleloader. For the uninitiated, that means it loads from the front. Muzzleloaders, by their very nature, tend to only carry a few rounds in the chamber at a time. Take Harry's pepper box, for example. It's a revolver with 3 barrels, and thus he can only fire it 3 times before he needs to reload his weapon. If this seems regressive in light of the other technology in the Disco Elysium universe, such as airships and radios, then you're on the right track. It is intentionally so. After the Anti-Centennial Revolution, when coalition forces conquered the Revachol commune, semi-automatic and breech-loading weapons were banned in Revachol by the Moral Intern, and production of such firearms was scaled back worldwide. All of this was done, as I'm sure you can imagine, in an attempt to prevent future communist uprisings across the world of Elysium. Even the Revachol Citizens Militia, the RCM, aren't allowed to use semi-automatics, hence why Harry and Kim are entering this showdown with only a few rounds to spare. The Crenell mercenaries, on the other hand, have no such restrictions. Again, they're a PMC, they don't give a shit about Revachol's laws, and were able to bring semi-automatics that they acquired in their homeland into the city. This is yet another reason why the Crenell Mercs, despite being outnumbered by a significant margin, are such a major threat to the people of Martinez. They have superior firepower, true weapons of war, while Harry, Kim, and the Hardys are wielding guns that wouldn't terrify General Grant. In short, it's a showdown between a militia that swings above their weight class and 3 highly trained professionals. And if Harry doesn't step up to the plate, a lot of people, decent people, are going to die. Initially, Harry and Kim attempt to de-escalate the conflict, believing there to be a peaceful solution to the situation. But it becomes clear rather quickly that this simply isn't possible. A suggestion advises Harry to get Raoul talking, in the hopes that if it does lead to a fight, he'll at least be distracted or caught flat-footed by their prior conversation. Before Harry dives into his dialogue options, if you've crafted the spirit bomb by combining the necktie and the blue medicinal spirit, the necktie will tell you it's time to light these fuckers up.
Alright, end game! Light me on fire and throw me in his face!
But the horrific necktie isn't exactly the most reliable source of advice for Harry, so it's best not to do this just yet. Again, as stated by suggestion, the ideal course of action is to get Raoul talking, and get under his skin before engaging the mercs. As you might expect, the mercenaries are resistant to Harry's attempts to defuse the situation. One thing that really stands out to me throughout the tribunal, and especially in this early section here, is the racism and dehumanizing language used by the mercs. Initially, this seemed out of place to me, because as much of a dump as Martinez is, it's not what someone in our world might consider to be a third world country. So when Raoul calls the citizens natives and talks about blowing up their huts, it seemed strange to me, until I considered what this meant about the group's training. As grim as it is, it makes sense that they would have had this type of worldview drilled into them. In order to be the ruthless butchers Cornell needs them to be, the brutal vanguards of Orkney's capitalist interests, they need to have a blatant disregard for human life. And as Raoul points out, it was Lely's warmer, charismatic nature that ended up getting him killed. Something else that sticks out to me is, for lack of a better term, their foul language. They sure do drop a shitload of curses. It's tempting to say that they curse like sailors, but even that's not a fair description of how they use their sentence enhancers. To be more accurate, they curse like a bunch of middle schoolers, dropping F-bombs in places that don't make sense, and using tenses that don't agree. To hear this type of dialogue from an adult is especially jarring, which is some great characterization by the developers. Early in the tribunal, Harry and Kim try to deal with the most obvious stumbling block to peace, the fact that the Hardys took responsibility for the murder. To address this point, if you decided not to rest Claudia back on the rooftop of the Whirling, then Harry can attempt to appeal to her for help. A neutral party who could confirm that the Hardys didn't do it, the mysterious Claudia might have been the only person capable of defusing this standoff. But unfortunately for the dynamic detective duo, she's gone. If you arrested her, she's obviously in jail, but if you let her stay free, then she pieced out right before the tribunal. This disappointing news is delivered by Gart, the cafeteria manager, who calls down from the balcony. His appearance here is nothing short of stunning, honestly. Gart has perfectly understandable reasons for being rude to Harry. The dude trashed his hotel room, acted like a giant asshole before he lost his memory, and harassed the girl he had a crush on. But he's not presented as a likable character. Not up until this point, anyway. He can be rather cruel, especially if you don't have enough money to pay for your hotel room, where he hands Harry the keys to the dumpster, which can lead to getting a game over. But for him to be here on the balcony, unarmed and keeping it together, is pretty damn impressive if you ask me. He even calls the mercenaries assholes, which is more aggressive than anything most of the Hardys say until the fighting goes down. It's around this point that Rhetoric suggests to Harry that he try and make an argument to prove that the Hardys didn't do it. You can bring up the opinion of the Wild Pines group, ask him what Joyce would think about this, but he really doesn't care. This dialogue tree makes Raoul sound even more unhinged, which prompts Shanky, the most cowardly of the Hardys, to hightail it out of there. Titus, ever the leader, puts on his best 40k commissar impression, telling his boys that if any more of them dare run, he'll shoot them himself. It keeps the rest of his crew in place, something that will benefit our protagonist in the long run. Ultimately, one of the more important but dangerous routes to go down for Harry is to bring up what he has figured out about the case so far, that Lely wasn't hung by the Hardys, but rather shot by someone who's not here, a sniper from a great distance away. Raoul scoffs at the Disco Cop's theory, daring him to say it was a magic sniper one more time before firing off a shot at the Hardys. If you pass a logic check, you can address the fact that the hanging was a cover-up for the real cause of death, leading to a warning shot from Raoul. If you fail this check, he'll shoot Elizabeth for real, and she'll become the first to die in the tribunal. It's important to note here that you can attack Raoul at any time, either by throwing the spirit bomb or shooting him with your pepper box. But the more you get him off kilter, the more you make logical points and distract him, the better chance you'll have of hitting him. Remember, Harry might have been a gym teacher, but unless you've really improved your physique, his athletic days are long behind him, meaning that he's in far from perfect shape for a firefight. From there, if you're still out to increase your chances of nailing the drunken merc, you can make more arguments to get under his skin. Harry can call into question Raoul's rank and Cornell, and address their inebriated state, but he'll get the most mileage out of talking about Lely. He can mention his baby blue eyes, his charisma, and how clear it is that Raoul and the others cared for him. All of this will help improve Harry's chances of a successful hit. But one of the most beneficial topics centers around Raoul's history with Lely. As it turns out, they were foster brothers, and piecing this information together and addressing it will really throw him off his game. This is furthered if Harry tells him that Lely was found left for dead at birth in a leaf compactor, a harrowing origin story that Raoul won't be able to get out of his mind. If you've gone through all these dialogue options, as suggestion urged you to do, you should have a high chance of success at either hitting Raoul with the spirit bomb or shooting him with Harry's pepper box. So long as you connect, the same thing happens. Raoul takes a critical hit from the attack, and is taken out of the fight until the very end of it. But if you want some fantastic Disco Elysium signature storytelling, the best thing to do is to use the spirit bomb. The way the game describes the tie and the flames making contact with Raoul is nothing short of beautiful. It almost makes it sound like the tie is ascending to a higher plane of existence, a perfect form.
In the fiery inferno, you see your tie, coiling around the man's neck. It is no longer horrific, but beautiful and pure.
Harry will then get a final chance to talk with his beloved necktie, where the tie will share his catalog number in place of his name, and reveals that Harry bought it while he was deep in his depression, at a time when he desperately needed to inject some fun into his life. In fact, the tie was the first part of the disco ensemble he bought, which explains why he had such an attachment to it, and probably why he seems to think it can talk to him as well. The tie will go into detail about how he encouraged Harry to have fun, to drink and do drugs. As I see it, this suggests that Harry not only personified this necktie and thought it could talk to him, but also that he foisted the responsibility of many of the negative behaviors he was engaging in, namely substance abuse and partying, onto the tie, this extension of his personality. It was, essentially, his way of disassociating from his actions, of distancing himself from his downward spiral. But now it's come full circle. As Harry takes a heroic stand in defense of war-torn Martinez, the tie is there to help him defeat the mercenaries and warn him of incoming danger, which it does with its final words to the detective.
Harry, for God's sake! Watch out!
To Harry's right, Hohenlohe is about to unload. As mentioned, his gun is an anti-tank rifle, described in-game as a knock cannon, with a honeycomb-shaped barrel that fires 6 shots at once. The blast comes at Harry, and unless you successfully dodge, or are wearing the ceramic armor you can take from Lely's corpse, he'll take some serious damage from the attack. Seconds later, Kim and DePaul shoot at roughly the same time. It takes Harry a few seconds to figure out what happened through the smoke and the chaos, but Kim displays some incredible marksmanship and hits Hohenlohe in the eye socket. As for DePaul, her attack was aimed at Harry, but missed the detective. Instead, it hits Alec, who quickly bleeds out from his wounds. But unfortunately for Harry, the next shot coming his way isn't going to miss. Whether you shot him or hit him with the spirit bomb, Raoul manages to roll over onto his back and take aim at Harry. As the game describes, it will be the last thing he'll do on this earth, a literal death rattle at his fiery end. But he's going to fire that gun, and it's going to tear right through our protagonist. No matter what you do, no matter how skilled your Harry is at dodging, you cannot get out of the way of this one. The game is programmed this way. This roll is set up to fail. After the gunshot goes off, the screen cuts to black. The bullet tears through Harry's pelvis, crippling him and causing him to lose a substantial amount of blood. Though we don't see what's going on around him, the dialogue and narrative descriptions do an incredible job of setting the scene.
Something inside your pelvis explodes. Your entire lower body is on fire and your legs can't support you. You fall down like a rag doll. The pain is too immense to scream. It pushes the air out of your lungs. Everything goes dark, a distant blur as you recede into it.
Kim jumps into action, trying desperately to save his new partner's life. He does his best to stop the bleeding and keep Harry talking. Meanwhile, if Titus is still alive, he'll step up as well, ordering his men to protect Harry. It's a touching moment and easily one of my favorites in the game. When Harry first met Titus, the hulking dock worker did nothing but stonewall him. Now he's rushing into the line of fire to protect him against bloodthirsty mercenaries. But back to Harry, his dialogue choices here are illuminating. In some of them, Harry can say that he actually remembers everything that happened before the events of the game, and that everything he said about his amnesia was just an act. I'm not really a fan of this train of thought. I find it hard to square with the numerous pieces of evidence that Harry really did have a catastrophic mental break that caused him to forget everything after he drank himself into oblivion. But it is interesting that they're here. Perhaps they're less about validity and more about Harry continuing to doubt and disparage himself, even here at the end. The options here that I personally find to be the most compelling and the most in character for Harry are those related to Dora. He can talk about calling her and lament that it's the reason they aren't getting back together, as if there aren't a multitude of reasons that they broke up, or speak lovingly of how she smells of apricots. But while Harry is bleeding out both physically and mentally, the tribunal is still going on. While Kim is desperately working to keep our protagonist alive, DePaul comes up behind him, ready to unload. Kim's so engrossed in trying to save Harry that he doesn't notice her, which is yet another incredibly touching moment. Even in the heat of battle, surrounded by gunfire and drunken mercs, Kim's priority isn't to keep on fighting, or to save himself, it's to make sure that Harry doesn't die. It's at this point that we reach what might be the most pivotal moment in Harry's narrative arc, one that will either reward or punish the player for their interactions with Kim thus far. Even as his systems are failing, Harry knows DePaul is there. But once again, Kim doesn't. In this desperate moment, he can either force his gun into Kim's hand and hope that his partner knows what it means, or succumb to darkness. Though this skill relies on authority, you can get some hefty bonuses if you've cleared the following two conditions. The Lieutenant trusts you, and Kim truly trusts you. The difference between the two is best described by this comment from user Flaming Lily on my video about Kim. The Lieutenant trusts you. As a lieutenant, he trusts you as an officer. Kim truly trusts you. As a person, as a confidant, as a workmate, and dare I say it, a friend, he really, truly trusts you. Incredibly well said by Flaming Lily. Couldn't have put it better myself. In other words, you get the first by being good at your job, and the second by being an all-around good person towards Kim. If you succeed at this check, Harry will pass his gun over to Kim and shout no. In a beautiful moment of partnership and synergy that speaks to the bond the pair has developed during their time in Martinez, Kim will know exactly what Harry is trying to convey to him. He'll then turn around and shoot DePaul, killing her as Harry loses consciousness. If you manage to pull this off, Kim will continue to be your companion for the third and final act of the game. This is, of course, crucial to achieving the game's best ending. Not only is Kim the GOAT companion, but you need him to take a picture of the phasmid. If you fail the check or simply decide not to hand Kim Harry's gun, Kim will be shot by DePaul and spend the rest of the game in the hospital. He'll be replaced by Kuno. Yes, that Kuno, which is really interesting and worth checking out for yourself sometime, but definitely not the ideal way to close out the game. Although it gives Kuno an opportunity for a brighter future, it removes all possibility to take a picture of the phasmid, which is definitely a disappointment. Regardless, after losing consciousness, Harry will again get scolded by the reptilian brain and the limbic system, ushering him towards the end of Disco Elysium. As far as outcomes I didn't get to mention earlier, the Hardy Boys can take some heavy losses from the Tribunal. If Shanky doesn't run, he dies. Theo and Angus die as well, and if Harry doesn't successfully wound Raoul with his gun or the spirit bomb, Titus will die too, removing one of the Union's staunchest defenders from Martinez. Overall, I think the Tribunal is one of Disco Elysium's strongest sequences, and a fantastic example of the game's narratively focused RPG design. It's very much an on-the-rails structured plot point, but within that structure, there's so many unique story possibilities that allow for players to approach it in a number of different ways, and come away with several different outcomes. But there's far more about this incredible game that's worthy of discussion. So I hope you'll join me next time as I take a deep dive into the ending of Disco Elysium. Thanks for watching. Big thanks to Paul Looney, Aila Sound, and Zakid, whose music is featured in this video. Special thanks to M. Reddig, aka Moxie, who allowed me to use their incredible cover art for the thumbnail. To check out all 4 of these amazingly talented creators, just follow the links down below in the description box. Big shout out to all my silver and gold tier YouTube channel members and Patreon subscribers, including James Pruitt, Corey Matson, Gustavo Balabi, Lil Caesar, Reed, Pathonian, Faith G, Anna Novakova, Laura Parenti, and Sean Bobby, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time, and go Birds!